I'm a 28-year-old guy named Callum, and until last year, my life felt like it was on pause. After finishing college, I spent over a year applying to jobs, hearing nothing back, watching old classmates move cities, post promotions, travel. I'd scroll through those updates from my childhood bedroom, pretending it didn't sting. My parents never pushed for answers. My brothers never asked how I was doing. We weren't a big talking family. I was always kind of there, not close, not distant, just floating on the outer ring. Eventually, I got an offer, nothing glamorous, but it paid well and meant moving across the country. I packed up in 3 days and left. No farewell dinner, no big send-off. Just a handshake from my dad, a nod from my mom, and a good luck out there from one of my brothers as he scrolled through his phone. I remember watching my hometown disappear in the rearview mirror, wondering why I wasn't sad, maybe because I had nothing to miss. The first few months in the new city were exciting. New job, new coworkers, a little apartment I could afford on my own. I filled the space with cheap furniture, stacked up secondhand books, hung a few prints to make it feel like mine. I got into the rhythm of waking up early, riding the subway, making small talk in the break room. I wasn't unhappy, just busy enough to forget I was alone. But then the holidays came, Thanksgiving, then Christmas. My coworkers had family coming in, or they were flying back home. Plans, noise, stories. I waited for a message from home. Just a simple check-in, maybe a you coming back for the holidays. I didn't get anything. The family group chat stayed active. Memes, pictures of someone's dog, my brother's new car. I watched the bubbles pop up and disappear, like someone had started to say something, then thought better of it. One night in early January, I was walking home from the train station. Cold, wet, just one of those miserable evenings where your shoelaces won't stay tied, and your grocery bag rips halfway home. I got inside, tossed my coat onto a chair, and sat on the floor for some reason. I opened the family group chat and recorded a quick voice message. Nothing dramatic. Just said I missed them and hoped they were all doing okay. The message was under 10 seconds. I could see it had been played by all three of them. Mom, Dad, my two brothers, within the hour. No reply, not even a thumbs up or a heart. I figured maybe they were busy. Maybe they didn't know what to say. I went to bed thinking someone would respond in the morning. Nobody did. I watched the group chat keep moving. An uncle's birthday, photos of a new backyard project, jokes I didn't understand. My voice message disappeared into the scroll, like it had never been there. Not one word from anyone. It was like I'd spoken into a vacuum. A week went by. Then two. I started to wonder if I'd said something wrong. I listened to the message again. It was just a quiet, sincere check-in. No complaints, no accusations, just I miss you guys. Hope everyone's well. That's it. Eventually, I stopped checking the chat. Every time I opened it, there were more posts I hadn't reacted to. More reminders that I wasn't really part of the picture. At some point, my brother posted a photo collage from his birthday party. I wasn't in it, even though I'd been in town the week before. I looked through it again. Everyone else had been tagged. I didn't leave the group chat. I don't even know why. Maybe I was waiting for them to notice I hadn't said anything in a while. Maybe I just didn't want to lose the only connection I had, even if it barely counted. Instead, I started journaling, just scribbling down whatever came to mind, moments I'd buried without thinking. Like that one Christmas where everyone got matching sweatshirts with their names printed, except mine. Mine was a generic off-brand pullover from the clearance bin. Still had the tag on it. No one said anything. I tried to rationalize it all. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe they thought I was fine. But those maybes only held up for so long. Then, 8 months after that voice message, a new post appeared in the chat. Family BBQ next weekend. Who's in? Exclamation marks, burger emojis. Replies started pouring in within minutes. People confirming, joking about bringing potato salad, asking if someone still had the grill. No one mentioned my voice message. No one even said my name. I didn't respond. I didn't ask again. I just stared at the screen, watching everyone carry on like I wasn't there. Like I'd never said anything at all. That's the moment everything just stopped for me. Not in an angry way, just quiet, clear. Something in me finally understood. The BBQ message kept sitting there, fresh on top of the chat thread, filled with the usual back and forth between my brothers, my parents, a couple cousins. People chiming in with who was bringing what. Someone even made a joke about burning the hot dogs like last year. I watched the responses roll in, then finally typed something under it. Just one line. Did anyone ever listen to the message I sent a while back? No one replied. The chat kept moving like I hadn't said anything. One cousin sent a meme about rain ruining cookouts. Someone else replied with a video of a toddler falling into a kiddie pool. I watched the typing bubbles appear, disappear, come back. Nobody paused. Nobody asked. Nobody said a word about the voice message. The one I had sent 8 months ago. The one I watched all of them open and ignore. I waited until midnight. Then I opened the chat settings and left. No dramatic exit, no announcement. Just gone. The next morning, my phone buzzed once. A text from Noah, my older brother, 4 words. You're being dramatic. I didn't ignore it. I typed out a response and sent it before I could overthink. Told him I wasn't making a scene. I was just done pretending like the silence hadn't meant anything. I explained that it wasn't about one message. It was about every time I'd been invisible. Every time they'd laughed together over things I wasn't included in. Every birthday skipped. Every holiday I spent alone while the group chat buzzed with family photos. The message showed as read within 10 minutes. Then nothing. 3 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes after that, a message came in from my cousin Emily. She wasn't in the group chat. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Her message was short. Said her mom told her I had distanced myself from everyone lately, and that my mother was apparently upset about it. I asked Emily if she remembered the voice message. She said she didn't. I asked if her mom, my aunt, mentioned whether my mom had ever said anything about it. There was a pause in the chat. Then she sent, I don't really know, maybe she didn't know how to respond, and then she started talking about a family friend's wedding. I didn't answer. Instead, I tried calling my mom. She didn't pick up. No call back either. 4 hours later, I got a text. Let's not make a big deal out of this. We all love you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied with, then show it next time. After that, I blocked her number. I didn't want another vague message 3 weeks later pretending like nothing had happened. A few days after that, someone I hadn't heard from in years messaged me. Marcus, a family friend. He used to come by during birthdays and cookouts when we were kids. Hadn't seen him since I left town. His message just said, you were always the one they took for granted. I noticed that one hit different. It was short, nothing fancy, but it didn't come with an excuse. It didn't try to smooth things over, it just said what no one else had ever said out loud. That same evening, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not a post, not a rant, just an email. I kept it clean. No guilt trips. I laid out what had happened, how long it had been, and how it wasn't about being ignored once, it was about being overlooked for years. I said I wasn't angry. I wasn't even asking for anything. I just needed them to understand why I was stepping back. Why I wasn't going to be in the group chat, or show up at the next cookout, or answer texts that only came when someone needed something. I sent it to my parents, my 2 brothers, and the 3 cousins who were always the loudest in the chat. Then I logged out and shut the laptop. No replies. Not one. It's been weeks now. Nothing. Not even a receipt that someone opened it. And for the first time, I didn't keep checking. I didn't reread it. I didn't screenshot it or save it in a folder for later. The door didn't slam shut. It just stopped being held open. I started therapy on a rainy Tuesday. The kind of day where your shoes stay wet no matter how long you've been inside. I hadn't planned on it, but my job offered mental health support as part of their benefits package, and the sign-up link had been sitting in my inbox for weeks. I filled out the form during my lunch break, half expecting I'd cancel the appointment later. I didn't. The first session was over video. My therapist asked me to write down memories from my childhood and teen years, specifically times I felt left out or overlooked. I figured there might be a couple things, but once I started, the list just kept growing. I remembered things I hadn't thought about in years. One of the first that came up was Christmas when I was maybe 15. Everyone had gifts under the tree, wrapped and labeled. My brothers opened new jackets, games, things they'd mentioned wanting. I opened a gas station gift card, not even in a box, just handed to me with the sticker still on it. I didn't even have a license yet. That memory stuck to the page harder than the others. It wasn't the gift itself. It was how no one thought it was strange. No jokes, no teasing, just moved on like it was normal. That kind of thing didn't happen once or twice. It had always been that way, just hadn't had a name before. After a few sessions, my therapist suggested finding a support group. I found one near my neighborhood that met every other Thursday. The people there were all different ages, backgrounds, but everyone carried something similar. Stories about being left out, talked over, minimized. I read parts of my journal during one of the meetups. Someone across the circle nodded through the whole thing. Another person came up after and said it felt like I was reading from their own notebook. It didn't fix everything, but it helped. Hearing other people say, yeah, that happened to me too, that changed something. A few weeks later, I opened up my social media and started removing people. Quietly. No announcement, no cryptic posts, just unfollow, unfriend, remove. Cousins, uncles, even some old neighbors who were still somehow looped in. My brothers were already gone from my accounts, but I made sure my parents couldn't see my stuff either. Not out of spite, just to clear the space. I kept a few coworkers, one friend from college, the support group leader. 2 days after that, I missed a call. The number was familiar but not saved. The voicemail was short. It was my dad. He said he didn't want this whole thing to become a family feud. That was the word he used. Feud. Like I was swinging a sword. I archived the voicemail and moved the number into blocked contacts. He hadn't called before, hadn't called since I left the chat, and now it was about keeping the peace. A few hours later, an aunt sent me a friend request and a message, said she'd heard I was going through emotional issues, told me to reach out if I needed help. I declined the request, didn't answer the message. I wasn't interested in being the topic of someone else's dinner table concern. I wanted connection, not commentary. That weekend I went hiking with a few friends from work. We weren't super close, but they'd invited me without any kind of pity or pressure. The trail wasn't long, but the view at the top was good. Someone took a group photo near the ridge. We all had windburned cheeks and were laughing about sandwiches getting crushed in backpacks. I posted the photo later that night. No caption, no tags, just shared it. The only people who saw it were the ones I still let in. A couple days later, my boss was giving a talk during a team meeting. It was nothing heavy, just something about workplace culture and team values. He mentioned he'd grown up in foster care, said that at a certain point in his life, he stopped trying to be part of a family that didn't exist and started choosing the people who actually showed up for him. That stuck with me. That night, I opened a blank document and started writing what I called a personal manifesto. Not rules, just standards. Things I would no longer excuse. How I expected to be treated. What I would and wouldn't accept moving forward. I wrote it out slowly, like a contract. Then I printed it and tucked it in a drawer beside my bed. I went back through my emails that night, deleted the message I'd sent to my family, deleted the thread, cleared out old screenshots, archived text chains. It wasn't a purge, just a quiet cleanup. No more hoping for apologies. No more waiting for a silence to mean something different. It wasn't about fixing anything anymore. It was about making room. And for the first time, I looked around at my life and didn't see myself as the one who messed up. I just saw someone who'd been erased for too long, finally standing in the frame. A coworker named Aiden invited me to his birthday party. It was a casual invite, just mentioned it after a meeting and said a few people from work were going. I said I'd think about it. I almost didn't go. Spent most of that Saturday rearranging books, clearing out a drawer that didn't need clearing, just stalling. Then around 6, I put on a clean shirt, grabbed a bottle of wine from the kitchen shelf, and left. The party was already going when I got there. Nothing big, backyard lights strung up, folding tables, someone grilling near the fence. People I recognized from the office were there, along with their friends, partners, and in some cases, family. Aiden's dad brought a homemade cake. His sister came in with a bag of gifts and hugged him at the door. They laughed loud and talked over each other in a way that felt easy. I stayed close to the drink table at first, then sat down with a few coworkers near the fire pit. Someone passed around a photo book Aiden's mom had made. Pictures of him as a kid, goofy middle school shots, stuff like that. Everyone was joking, teasing, sharing stories. The kind that build up naturally when people have history and space to show up for each other. I left a little after 10, walked most of the way home even though I'd brought my Metro card. My phone buzzed as I reached my street. It was a text from my cousin Jake. We hadn't talked in almost a year. The message was short. Stop acting like a victim. I didn't respond. Just opened the contact, blocked the number, and moved on. I logged it in my notes app later as a reminder. Jake, boundary held. The next day, another message came through. This time from Dylan, my younger brother. He hadn't said a word since I left the group chat. His message was just a quick check-in, except he phrased it like a joke. Asked if I was still upset about that message thing. I told him I was open to talking, but only if he could acknowledge what happened. I didn't explain it again. Just made it clear I wasn't playing word games. His reply came in a few minutes later. You're being sensitive. I blocked his number right after. That made 2. Later that week, I logged into Facebook to clear out some old posts and realized my mom had shared a status earlier in the day. It was one of those long paragraph-style rants about kids these days, and how they take everything too personally. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. The comments were filled with relatives liking it, agreeing with her, joking about how tough love used to work better. I deleted the account the same day. There wasn't anything left there that I needed. In my next therapy session, I brought up the party. Not the messages after, just the event itself. The laughter, the photos, the way people leaned on each other without asking for permission. My therapist pointed something out, how I had grown up being rewarded for staying quiet and brushed off any time I asked for more than the minimum. That hit differently when said out loud. That night, I sat in my room with the lights low and recorded a voice memo. I didn't script it, just hit record and spoke. It was everything I needed someone to tell me at that moment. Not to fix things, but to feel like I wasn't asking for too much. I saved the recording and titled it Reminder. A few days passed, then an envelope showed up in my mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a short letter from my grandmother. She said she didn't know exactly what had happened, but wanted me to know she was thinking of me. She hoped I was doing okay. It was the first time someone from that side of the family reached out without pretending like nothing was wrong. She didn't try to explain it away or guilt me into responding. Just sent care, plain and simple. I wrote back the next day. Included a photo from the hiking trip and told her I joined a local mentorship program for teens who were dealing with rough family stuff. She didn't have email, so I mailed it old school with a postcard from the city tucked in the envelope. The mentorship program had come up through a flyer at the library. I signed up without overthinking it. A couple weekends later, I went to an orientation meeting. The room had about 20 people. Some were former mentees, some were volunteers. Everyone had a reason for being there. I didn't talk much during the first meeting, just listened. But afterward, one of the mentors offered to show me around and introduce me to a few others. There was no pressure, no performative welcome, just people who had been through things and wanted to show up for someone else. By the time I left that day, I already knew I'd be going back. It didn't look like much from the outside. Just a rented space above a community center, plastic chairs, a vending machine that barely worked. But inside, it felt like something different was starting. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't fixing something broken. I was building something new. The mentorship group matched me with a 15-year-old named Ezra. We sat across from each other in a quiet room the first day, flipping through the same deck of icebreaker cards without picking one. He didn't say much, mostly nodded, eyes on the floor, but over time he started showing up early, staying after. Never loud, never dramatic. Just present in a way that told me he wanted to be understood without having to explain too much. One day after a volunteer workshop, we were cleaning up art supplies and folding chairs when he said it. Out of nowhere. I don't think anyone at home even notices when I leave the room. He said it flat, like a fact, not a complaint. It stayed with me. I wrote it down that night at my kitchen table, then left my journal open and stared at it. The next few entries were different. I stopped listing every time I'd been left out or ignored, and instead wrote about the kind of connections I actually wanted. I wrote things like, I want people who check in without being prompted, and I want to stop second-guessing whether I matter to the people around me. It felt like shifting a spotlight, less on the damage, more on what comes next. Midweek, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. No handwriting I recognized. I opened it and found a wedding invitation from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. My name was spelled wrong. There was no +1, just a generic invitation with a glitter border and a registry link. It didn't feel like a peace offering. It felt like a checkbox being ticked. I tossed it in the recycling bin and didn't reply. 2 days later, the cousin unfriended me from social media. I noticed the notification while scrolling before bed and just laughed. I didn't even bother checking what she posted afterward. I blocked the account and moved on. That Saturday, a few coworkers planned a spontaneous day trip to a small coastal town 2 hours away. I went, no hesitation this time. We walked along the boardwalk, ate overpriced ice cream, made dumb bets at an arcade. During lunch, I told a story from high school I'd never shared with anyone at work before. It wasn't a dramatic story, but it was personal. No one interrupted, no one laughed in the wrong spot. They just listened. One of them asked questions like they wanted to know more, not like they were waiting for their turn to talk. The next therapy session, I mentioned it. My therapist nodded and said something about how I'd stopped trying to fit and started showing up. No more playing the quiet role to stay easy to keep around. 2 nights later, an email came in from an aunt I hadn't heard from since the family group chat days. She kept it short, said she'd read my message way back when, and hadn't known how to respond. Told me she hoped I was doing better now. That was it. No apology. No accountability. Just a vague reach out that felt more like a way to say I did my part than anything sincere. I archived the email without replying. Then I went into my contacts and deleted her number for good. That night, I opened the saved voice message I'd sent to the family chat. The original one, 8 months old. I listened to it through headphones, sitting at my desk. I already knew the words by heart, but I played it one last time. My voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Careful, like I was testing the waters in my own family's living room. When it ended, I deleted it from my phone without pausing. Didn't save a copy, didn't back it up. It was done. There were no texts after. No last-minute apologies. No surprise reactions. Just stillness. I closed the laptop, poured myself some tea, and sat on the balcony while the sun went down. Cars moved below. A neighbor's dog barked twice. The world kept moving. For once, I didn't look over my shoulder to see if anyone noticed. I wasn't writing for proof anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to get it. I was building something that didn't need their permission to exist. The mentorship program organized a small community event during Mental Health Awareness Week. It was part panel, part open discussion, mostly aimed at sharing personal stories and offering resources. Someone from the organizing team asked if I'd be willing to speak about my experience. I hesitated, but said yes. They gave me 10 minutes. The event was held in a high school gym that had been decorated with folding chairs, banners, and a long table of coffee and cookies. My part came toward the middle. I didn't use notes. I stood, told the story plainly, how I had reached out to my family when I needed them most, how every single one of them saw the message and said nothing. How silence over time can start to sound louder than any insult. I didn't make it dramatic. I didn't point fingers. I just told the truth. After the panel ended, people milled around the snack table and chatted in small groups. A woman came up to me. She looked like she was around my age, maybe a little younger. She said, "Your story felt like mine," and then we just stood there for a minute without needing to explain anything else. We sat down on the edge of the gym bleachers and talked for almost an hour. About how families sometimes close ranks when you stop staying silent. About how hard it is to walk away from people who gave you your name even when they refuse to see you. We exchanged contact info before leaving. Over the next few weeks, we started meeting up, coffee first, then walks, then dinners. The pace was slow, natural. She never pressed for details, never offered empty fixes. We just talked and listened, like equals. One evening over dinner at a tiny cafe, she asked what family meant to me now. I didn't think long. I just said, the people who show up and stay. Around the same time my lease was ending. I'd been in that apartment for almost 2 years. It was clean and quiet, but it never felt lived in. 2 people from the mentorship circle, James and Leo, were looking for a third to move into a small rental house across town. I liked them, trusted them, and after a tour of the place, I said yes. The house was older, nothing fancy, uneven floors, chipped paint, a small kitchen that smelled like cinnamon. But the first night I moved in, there were string lights already hung in the living room, mismatched mugs in the cabinet, and a house rule written in marker on the fridge that said, "Don't keep your feelings in the junk drawer." At dinner, we shared a loaf of bread someone baked that afternoon. It wasn't a big deal, but it felt like home. That week, I had a dream. In it, my family sat around the table and said sorry. Each one of them, one by one, told me they'd heard the message and didn't know how to respond but wished they had. I woke up before I could say anything back. There was no anger in it, just a strange quiet. Later that day, I was cleaning out some digital folders and found an old draft labeled "Second Try." It was a message I had written months ago. Something I never sent. A follow-up I thought might make them finally respond. I didn't open it, I just right-clicked and hit delete. I didn't need to read through it to know how much had changed. That same night, I sat down and updated the calendar on my phone. I added birthdays, anniversaries, and reminders, not for the family I was born into, but for the people who had earned those dates. My roommates, the mentorship group, the woman I was seeing. No more holding space for people who didn't want it. No more hoping for invitations that came out of obligation. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. It was someone I knew from high school, Nathan. We weren't close. His message said he'd heard some kind of drama was happening with my family. I stared at it for a second, typed back, not drama, just clarity. Then I deleted the thread and blocked the number. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Leo burning toast, James trying to fix a wobbly chair, and music playing softly from someone's laptop. We sat around the kitchen table with cheap mugs and scrambled eggs, laughing about nothing in particular. A light breeze came through the cracked window, and someone's phone buzzed, but no one reached for it. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to earn my place at the table. I was already in it. Friendsgiving was James's idea. He taped a sign to the fridge 3 weeks early that said, "Everyone bring someone who mattered this year." Below it, in red marker, he'd written, "Doesn't have to be family, just real." The rule was simple, no plus ones out of politeness. If someone was coming, it had to mean something. I invited 3 people. My therapist mentor from the support group, the woman I'd been seeing, and a coworker who once drove across town at midnight when my power went out during a snowstorm. The table wasn't big enough for everyone, so we dragged in the coffee table from the living room and pushed everything together. Folded napkins, mismatched chairs, food from every direction. Someone brought vegan stuffing, someone else brought pie in a reusable grocery bag. Halfway through the meal, after someone knocked over a glass and we'd all laughed too long, Leo stood up and raised a plastic cup. He said, "To the people who choose to show up." That was it. No long speech, just that line. Nobody clapped. We didn't need to. Everyone understood. 3 nights later, I got a text from a number not saved in my phone. The preview showed only 5 words. "We need to talk." Mom. She was using a different number. I didn't open it. I held the screen for a second, then tapped block and deleted the thread. I hadn't heard from her since I'd blocked her old number months ago. That door wasn't cracked anymore. It had been closed, locked, and sealed with time. At my next therapy session, I mentioned it. My therapist didn't ask why I didn't respond. Instead, we talked about how healing doesn't always come from getting the conversation we wanted. Sometimes it comes from no longer needing it at all. A week later, a school counselor from the mentorship group emailed me. She'd heard about the panel I spoke at and asked if I'd talk to a group of students dealing with fractured family dynamics. Nothing formal, just a conversation. I said yes. To prepare, I opened a file I hadn't touched in almost a year. It was a long list I once kept, a record of things I'd wished someone had acknowledged, missed birthdays, ignored messages. The way I was always the last one told, the last one asked, the first one forgotten. I read through every line. For the first time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like a story that already had its ending. That weekend, I printed the list, folded it up, and took it to a trail near the edge of the city. There was a clearing halfway up a hill where the wind always hit a little harder. I brought a lighter and a small tin. No one was around. I watched the paper curl and darken. When it was done, I buried the ashes beneath a rock and walked back without turning around. A few days after, I got a message on social media from a distant uncle. He'd never reached out before. Said he'd been thinking about the good old family days and hoped I was doing all right. I read it twice, replied once. That version of the family never really included me. Then I deleted the thread and blocked the account. That was the last time anyone from the old circle tried to make contact. No more surprise messages. No more guilt-wrapped check-ins. Just stillness. It didn't feel like silence used to. It wasn't the cold, lonely kind that makes you wonder if you're forgotten. This was something else, space I had created, not space left behind. Later that month, I changed my phone number. I sent it only to 10 people. Not a mass text, no announcement, just quiet, hand-picked choices. My roommates got it. The woman I was seeing got it. A few coworkers, my mentor, 2 people from the support group. That was it. I also updated my emergency contacts for the first time in years. Took my parents off, took my brothers off, replaced them with people who had shown up when I didn't have to ask. People who checked in without waiting for holidays or crises. There was no dramatic moment, no final goodbye. I just opened the settings, typed in new names, and saved the changes. That night, we had leftovers from Friendsgiving. James reheated stuffing in a frying pan, and Leo made garlic bread out of hamburger buns. We ate at the kitchen counter because no one wanted to clear the table. There were books stacked near the sink, someone's hoodie draped over a chair, and a to-do list written on a whiteboard that no one followed. I didn't wonder what my family was doing that evening. I didn't scroll or search or wait. I had things to do, dishes to wash, people to laugh with, and I was exactly where I needed to be. The mentorship program sent out an email asking if anyone would be willing to write a short piece for their upcoming quarterly newsletter. The theme was resilience and identity, especially for those navigating family estrangement or transition. I sent a reply the same day and started writing that night. I didn't talk about blame. I didn't list names or incidents. I wrote about the in-between spaces, those moments when you outgrow who you were taught to be, but aren't yet sure who you're becoming. I described the feeling of sending out a message and hearing nothing back. I talked about how survival isn't just staying alive, it's choosing to rebuild when nothing familiar feels safe anymore. I ended it with something I'd once written in my journal: you don't have to be included in order to be whole. A week after it was shared internally, I got messages from 3 different teens in the program. One just said, "I didn't know it was okay to let go until now." Another thanked me for saying what they hadn't found the words for yet. A mentor I hadn't met before forwarded a note from a parent, saying they read the piece with their child and cried quietly in the kitchen afterward. I saved all of it in a folder called Kept Things. That weekend, the woman I'd been seeing invited me to meet her closest friends. It was a small dinner at someone's apartment, soup simmering in a pot, blankets thrown over the couch, fairy lights above the window that flickered slightly. The conversation bounced easily, and nobody made introductions feel like interviews. At one point, someone asked about my family, not in a nosy way, just one of those casual questions that shows up after people feel safe enough to ask. I told the truth. I said I hadn't spoken to most of them in over a year, and didn't plan to. I didn't apologize for it. I didn't minimize it. I just said it plainly, and no one flinched. A few days later, a handwritten envelope appeared in the mail. It was from my grandmother. Inside was a birthday card, simple design, quiet message. At the bottom, in her handwriting, "You never deserve to be overlooked." No lecture, no story, just that line. I wrote her back that night. I thanked her. I told her she was the only one who ever made space for me without making it about herself. I included a recent photo of me and the roommates sitting on our roof during sunset, eating sandwiches out of takeout boxes. I told her the names of the people in it and how they'd made life easier without even trying. At work later that week, one of my coworkers was filling out HR paperwork for his newborn and joking about how intense the naming process was. He looked up and said, half joking, "You ever think about changing your last name, like if it didn't match you anymore?" The question stuck. That night, I started researching what it would take to legally change mine. I didn't want anything dramatic, just a clean slate. I decided on using my middle name as my new last name. It wasn't flashy, but it felt like something I'd picked for myself. Not passed down, not inherited. Chosen. I started the paperwork the next morning. As it processed, I updated my email signature, social media profiles, and accounts, one by one. I changed the display names on group chats, edited my voicemail greeting, signed a lease update. No announcement, just quiet changes that added up to something real. Then I opened the folder I had once guarded like proof, screenshots, message logs, timestamps from when I was ignored or brushed off. I clicked through it once, then deleted the whole thing. I didn't need evidence anymore. My story wasn't something I had to justify. During one of the next mentorship sessions, a teenager pulled me aside. He said, "You seem like someone who figured it out." I smiled and told him the truth. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm doing it on my terms. That night, I printed the note from my grandmother and framed it. I placed it on the shelf above my desk. It's the only family letter I've kept. That same week, I slept through the night for the first time in a long time. No dreams about being left out. No old voices echoing in my head. Just sleep. The past isn't gone. It's not forgotten. But it's not steering anymore. I am. One morning, I was making coffee when I looked at the calendar and realized it had been exactly 1 year since I sent that voice message. The original one, the short, quiet recording I'd sent to the family group chat, the one everyone saw and no one responded to. I didn't go searching for it. I didn't try to relive anything. I remembered every second of it already. Uncertain tone, careful words, like I was tiptoeing into my own family's living room. Instead, I opened my voice memos and recorded a new one. No script, just a few clear, steady sentences. I spoke as if I were talking to the version of myself who had sent that message last year. No blame, no hope, just honesty. I saved the file under the name Year One and closed the app. Later that week, I got an email from a wellness publication that focused on community mental health. One of their writers had heard about my mentorship work through a local school. They asked if I'd be open to sharing part of my story for an upcoming issue. I said yes, but only if it centered on healing, no headlines, no messy details, just the process of rebuilding life after family disconnect. The article went live online quietly. Just a small profile with a picture of me at a mentorship event, arms crossed but smiling. I didn't think much of it, but over the next few days, a few messages trickled in. One was from an old classmate who said reading the article helped him understand something about his dad. Another was from a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years, saying she sent it to her son. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need to. I hadn't told the story to get answers or praise. It wasn't about being seen anymore. It was about sharing what happens after the silence. That same weekend, my roommates and a few close friends pulled together a surprise gathering. I walked into the kitchen, and there was a cake on the counter with my new surname written across the top and icing. Someone had ordered it from a local bakery, spelled it perfectly. There were snacks, candles, and a playlist of songs I'd mentioned liking once in passing. I stood there for a second while they clapped, then said, "I never thought I'd have this. Nothing big, just that." Later that night, we sat out on the porch with mugs of tea. The woman I'd been seeing leaned back in her chair and looked at me for a while before saying, "You're not who you were when we met." I nodded and answered, "Thank you. I worked hard not to be." That was it. Nothing poetic, just the truth. A few days before Christmas, I got a photo from my grandmother. It was a group picture from the family's holiday gathering, same setup as every year, matching pajamas, decorations, people squeezed together on the couch. I wasn't in it, not even mentioned in the caption. She sent it anyway, followed by a short note, asterisk. Some things don't change. I'm still proud of you. I replied the same day. They never saw me, but you always did. That's enough. I didn't feel the need to ask questions or dissect who was in the photo or what they were doing. That chapter had been closed long ago. It didn't reopen because someone hit send on a message. It didn't need a final conversation or a last apology. The room I used to want a seat in wasn't mine to begin with. Now there's a different table. One I helped build. It has uneven chairs, inside jokes, group texts that actually get replies. The people at that table ask questions, remember details, check in without needing a reason. I still walk by things that remind me of what used to be. A song, a smell, a dish at a restaurant. But I don't reach for the past when it calls. I let it ring. The story doesn't end with a dramatic reunion. There's no unexpected knock at the door. No holiday miracle. No final perfect moment where it all makes sense. It ends with ownership of space, of silence, of self. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and this story starts with a birthday. Not a dramatic one, not a huge fight or a meltdown, just silence. That's what made it unforgettable. Growing up, our house wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel either. It was just practical. My parents weren't the kind of people who said I love you out loud. They believed in structure, discipline, and not making a fuss over things. We lived in a 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy but stable. Until I turned 11, my birthdays were small but still a thing. My mom would bake a cake from a box, and we'd have dinner as a family. Sometimes I got a toy car, or a board game, or even a new jacket if it lined up with what I needed anyway. My dad usually just nodded and said, "Happy birthday, champ," then went back to reading the newspaper. It wasn't warm and fuzzy, but it was something. I didn't think to expect more. When I was 11, I started getting into skateboarding. Not seriously, I was still bad at it, but I liked watching older kids skate at the park. I circled a few models in the Sears catalog and left it open on the kitchen table a few times, just in case someone was looking for ideas. That year, things felt off around the house. My dad had lost his job in the spring and was home all the time, but in a heavy, quiet kind of way. He spent most of his days watching the news or pacing. My mom was picking up extra shifts at the hospital and always looked exhausted. No one fought, but the house felt tight, like everyone was holding their breath. A week before my 12th birthday, I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when my mom put down a grocery bag and casually said, "You know you're too old for presents now, right?" My dad, without looking up from the TV, added, "Yeah, it's time you stopped expecting stuff like that. You're not a little kid anymore." I thought they were joking. I laughed, kind of awkwardly, and said, "Okay," but no one laughed with me. My mom just went back to unpacking the groceries. I figured maybe they were messing with me. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Or maybe they were just having a bad day. On the morning of my birthday, I didn't expect balloons or a party. I just expected something, a card, maybe, or a cupcake. Instead, I got up, got dressed, and walked into a kitchen that looked like every other morning. My dad was drinking coffee and scrolling through job listings. My mom was already gone for work. No one said a word about the date. At school, a girl in my class gave me a folded piece of construction paper with a smiley face on the front. It said, "Happy birthday," inside with a piece of gum taped in. Another kid shared some of their Skittles with me and said, "Hey, I heard it's your birthday." Cool. That was more than I got at home. I ate lunch in the bathroom. Not because I had no one to sit with. I did, but because I didn't want to tear up at the table. I didn't want to explain why I was sad. I didn't even understand it myself. After school, I walked home slow. I checked the porch just in case something was there. Nothing. Inside, the house was quiet. My dad was asleep on the couch. Dinner was leftovers. My mom came home late and didn't mention the date at all. At some point during dinner, my dad looked at me and said, "You're a man now. Men don't need gifts to feel special." That line stuck in my head more than anything else. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. After that, birthdays became a non-event. My younger brother was 9 at the time. He still got gifts. That same year, he got a brand new gaming console with 2 controllers and a stack of games. My parents clapped when he opened it. My brother asked me once why I didn't get anything for my birthday, and I just shrugged. He was a kid. I didn't want to ruin his happiness. But the older I got, the more I noticed the difference. When I turned 13, nothing. 14, same. By the time I was 16, it wasn't even a surprise anymore. I stopped mentioning it. At 19, I moved out. I didn't fight with them. I just packed up my stuff and left for college. No big goodbyes, no tearful farewells. That was just how we were. For a long time, I didn't talk about that birthday. It felt small compared to what other people went through. But recently, I've been in therapy. I started digging through old memories and realized how much that one moment changed the way I looked at myself. I used to think maybe I was too quiet, or not fun enough, that maybe I really didn't deserve the same things other kids got. But now I'm starting to ask better questions. Not why didn't they give me gifts, but why did they stop seeing me as someone who mattered? What I've found since then has been surprising. And the more I dig, the more I realize that birthday wasn't just a fluke. It was the start of something bigger, something I didn't understand at 12, but I do now. A few months into therapy, the 12th birthday came up. It wasn't planned. I was talking about something else, family dynamics, I think, and it just slipped out. That day, the silence. the way no one even looked at me differently. My therapist asked if I'd ever talked to my family about it. I hadn't, not once, not when it happened, not after. I just tucked it away and tried not to think about it for the last 18 years. A few weeks later, I was having dinner with my parents and younger brother, just the four of us. It was a quiet evening, the kind where nobody says much unless something's wrong. My dad had retired a few years back. My mom still picked up occasional nursing shifts, but mostly stayed home. My brother, 28 now, had just flown in from out of state for a visit. We'd ordered takeout, sat at the same kitchen table I'd grown up around, and halfway through dinner I decided to bring it up. I asked if they remembered my 12th birthday. My dad laughed like I was bringing up an old sports story. He called it a rite of passage, said every boy goes through that moment when childhood ends and you toughen up. He mentioned that his own father did the same thing. No gifts, no celebrations after a certain age. My mom didn't laugh, but she didn't look surprised either. She said it had been a rough year, that money was tight and things slipped through the cracks. My brother looked down at his plate and didn't say much at first. Then, he said he'd always wondered about that. He was 9 when it happened and remembered being confused. One year we both got cakes and balloons, and then suddenly it was just him. He said he thought maybe I didn't like birthdays or asked them to stop. I hadn't. I told them I wasn't upset about not getting a present. It wasn't about the skateboard or the lack of a cake. It was about feeling invisible. That's the part they didn't seem to get. My dad waved it off, said it was ancient history. That stuff builds character. My mom gave a long sigh and said she didn't think I'd remember any of it. That line landed weird. Like I was supposed to forget whole pieces of my life because they were inconvenient. I didn't finish my food. I left before dessert. No one stopped me. That night, I texted my brother. I asked if our parents had ever told him he was too old for presents. He replied a few minutes later, said no, he got gifts until he moved out. Then he asked why I was bringing this up now. I just left it on read. At my next therapy session, I went through it piece by piece. My dad's reaction, my mom's explanation, my brother's confusion. My therapist pointed out something that hadn't clicked until then. What they told me was a universal rule clearly wasn't. It was just for me. I went digging through old stuff at home after that. There were boxes of family photo albums in my closet, half dusty, half torn. The pattern was obvious once I started looking. Birthday pictures of my brother at 10, 11, 12, even 17. Balloons, hats, presents. For me, they stopped cold after age 11. Not a single candle, not a single card. I flipped through each album just to be sure. Nothing. Then, I remembered an old spiral notebook I used to write in. It had a red plastic cover with a half-torn sticker on the front. I found it tucked in the back of a drawer. There were stories, drawings, and random thoughts. One entry was dated the day of my 12th birthday. It wasn't long, just a few lines. Maybe they forgot, or maybe they just don't like me that much. It didn't read like a dramatic sentence. Just a kid trying to understand something that didn't make sense. Still needing answers, I called my aunt. She's my mom's older sister. We hadn't talked in a while, but she picked up right away. I asked her if she remembered anything unusual about the year I turned 12. There was a long pause. Then she said something that stuck. She said my mom used to call me the mature one. That I didn't need things like my brother did. That I was different. She never liked hearing that. Said it sounded like an excuse. Like my mom had already decided I could handle being ignored. I didn't argue with her. I just said thanks and hung up. That night, I looked back at the notebook again. I hadn't thought about that kid in a long time. The one who asked small questions and got smaller answers. Now it's different. I'm not looking for someone to say sorry. I just want the full story. And I think I'm finally starting to get it. After that call with my aunt, something shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she said it. How my mom used to call me the mature one, like that meant I didn't need anything. I started digging through more of my childhood stuff. There were old school report cards stacked in a plastic folder, birthday cards from neighbors and extended family, and a few photo albums I hadn't touched in years. The pattern was even clearer this time. My brother had photos from every birthday, balloons, cakes, shaped like cartoon characters, themed decorations. At age 15, there was a picture of him holding a new gaming headset with wrapping paper still on the floor. At 17, a photo of him blowing out candles at a barbecue with a dozen friends around him. Me? Nothing after 11. Just school portraits, soccer team photos, and one blurry shot of me in a hoodie on a random Tuesday. No captions, no dates, no birthday photos. A few days later, we had another dinner at my parents' place. It wasn't planned around anything. My brother was in town a little longer, and we'd all agreed to meet up again. Halfway through dinner, I brought it up. Not angrily. I just asked if they ever noticed that my birthdays disappeared from the photos. The room got quiet. My dad leaned back in his chair and said I was overthinking things. Not everything is a slight. He said if he had to dig into every old moment that didn't go perfectly, he'd never get anything done. My mom said again that those years were tight, financially. Then she added something else, that they thought I'd understand, because I always did. My brother didn't look at either of them. He just stared at his drink. Then he spoke up and said he remembered how weird it felt when the birthdays kept happening for him, but not for me. Said he felt uncomfortable sometimes blowing out candles while I just sat there at the table. I explained I wasn't trying to start a fight. I was in therapy. I was trying to understand the way I grew up and how it shaped the way I see myself, that it wasn't about presents. It was about disappearing, and how that started with them. My dad pushed his plate away and stood up, said it sounded like I was rewriting history just to feel like a victim. Then he walked out of the room. My mom stayed. She didn't say much for a while. Then she said she honestly thought I didn't mind, that I was always quiet about things, that I didn't ask for much. I told her I didn't speak up because I thought it would make me more of a problem, that maybe if I didn't complain, things would settle down. My brother apologized right then, not in a big dramatic way, just quietly, said he should have noticed, said he was sorry he didn't. Later that week I brought it up with my therapist. She told me something I hadn't thought about before, that I didn't need to wait for anyone to give me permission to celebrate my own life. That maybe it was time to build new traditions, instead of chasing old ones. So I did. I planned a birthday dinner. Nothing big, just 6 people. My brother flew in again. A few close friends came. We booked a small private room at a casual restaurant and ordered way too much food. I didn't want gifts. I just wanted it to feel like a real birthday for once. Something with laughter. Something that didn't feel like I had to earn it. My grandmother couldn't come in person, but she mailed me a handwritten card and an old photo of me at 5, covered in frosting and smiling like an idiot. I put it on the table beside the cake. My parents weren't invited. I didn't make a show of it. I just left them out of the plans. A week later, my mom found out about the dinner from my brother's social media and called. She didn't sound hurt. She sounded offended, like she'd been left out of something she was owed. She asked why she hadn't been invited. I told her the truth, that I didn't feel emotionally safe around her, that I wasn't looking to create a fake moment just to make her feel better. She started listing all the things she'd done over the years. The sacrifices, the long work hours, the bills. I didn't argue. I told her I wasn't looking for guilt. I was looking for honesty, and I'd never gotten that from her. She didn't say much after that, just said she didn't know what else I wanted from her. I told her I didn't want anything now. Before she hung up, I said something that had been sitting in my head for days. I said, "Now you understand what it felt like, for 7 years straight." Then I ended the call. And that was it. The birthday dinner ended up being better than I expected. We were just 6 people in a small rented room at a local bistro, nothing flashy. There was a string of lights overhead, mismatched plates, and a custom cake my friend ordered with "about time" written in icing. My younger brother flew in again and sat right next to me. We talked, we laughed, we shared stories I hadn't thought about in years. For the first time in a long while, the day felt like it actually belonged to me. After dessert, while we were still sitting around with coffee and leftovers, my brother brought something up. He remembered overhearing our mom on the phone when we were kids. He was around 10 at the time. She was talking to a relative and said I was too serious and hard to connect with. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but hearing it now, it hit different. It explained more than I expected. That line had probably followed me around without me knowing. I didn't cry a lot. I was quiet. I liked to read. I didn't throw tantrums or make a scene. Somewhere along the way, they decided that meant I didn't need much. Or maybe it was easier for them to believe that. One of my friends at the table, someone I've known since college, asked if I still talked to my grandmother. She remembered meeting her once years ago, then never again. That got me thinking. My grandmother had been around when I was little, family dinners, Christmas cards, birthday calls, but she vanished around the same time my birthdays did. The next day, I found her number in an old address book. I wasn't even sure it would still work, but when I called, she picked up on the second ring. Her voice was a little thinner than I remembered, but still warm. I told her who it was and asked if she wanted to meet. She said yes without hesitation. We met at a small cafe just off Main Street. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window with a book in her lap. When she saw me, she smiled like no time had passed. We ordered coffee, sat down, and talked for nearly 2 hours. She explained a lot. After I turned 12, she said she kept trying to bring birthday gifts, but my parents told her not to. They said I was too old, too mature for that kind of thing, that I didn't need surprises or toys anymore. They said they didn't want her encouraging unrealistic expectations. She tried to argue, more than once, but every time she brought it up, it turned into a fight. Eventually, she stopped coming around, not because she didn't care, but because it felt like there was no space left for her. Before we left, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. It was a little beat up and wrapped in yellowed tissue paper. Inside was a metal keychain, just a simple skateboard-shaped charm with my initials on it. She bought it for my 12th birthday. She said she never got to give it to me, so she just kept it all these years. I didn't know what to say. I thanked her and held on to it the whole walk back to the car. That night, I called my brother and told him everything. He didn't say much at first, then admitted he had no idea our parents had shut other people out too. He always thought they were just distant in their own way, not actively pushing people away. It changed the way he saw it all. I started writing things down after that. Not just events, but scraps of conversations, moments that used to feel blurry. There were things I thought I misremembered, but now they made more sense. Little things, like how I stopped getting invited to family get-togethers while my brother still went. How neighbors who used to bring over birthday cards for both of us slowly stopped mentioning mine altogether. My grandmother began calling me every few days after that coffee meetup. Sometimes just to check in, sometimes to share a story I hadn't heard before. She told me about a time I fell asleep in her lap watching cartoons, about how I used to help her fold laundry and talk about dinosaurs. Small things, but they filled in gaps I didn't know I still had. It became clear that what happened to me wasn't just forgetfulness. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a series of choices people made. They looked at me and decided I didn't need care, that I was fine on my own, that I could take it. They were wrong. But now, I'm finally starting to see the full picture, and the boy who didn't get a birthday at 12, he deserved more than silence. The weekly calls with my grandmother became a regular thing, usually Sunday afternoons. She'd tell me little stories about the old neighborhood, about how I used to line up my toys in straight rows, about how she once caught me trying to microwave a marshmallow just to see what would happen. Her voice never rushed. She remembered everything, even the small stuff. One afternoon, in the middle of telling me a story about a summer trip we never took because my dad refused to go, she stopped for a second. Then she told me she almost called child services once. Not because of bruises or yelling, there was none of that, but because she'd never seen a house feel so emotionally shut down. She said it was like living in a room where no one looked at each other for too long, but she worried if she called, it would just land on me, that whatever came next would make it worse. I brought that up in therapy the following week. My therapist didn't act surprised. She said something I didn't expect though, that being called independent too early isn't a compliment. It's usually an excuse. Something adults say when they've decided you won't need anything from them. That clicked hard. That word, independent, had followed me around since I was a kid. Teachers used it, family used it, even neighbors. I never thought to question it. But now, it made everything line up in a way that felt different. Being quiet, being self-managed, doing my homework without reminders, it had all been misread as proof I didn't need care, so they didn't offer it. A few days after that session, I called my brother again. I asked him if he remembered any signs of favoritism when we were kids. He hesitated for a moment, then said he remembered our dad calling him the golden kid once when they were tossing a football outside, not in a deep way, just as a joke. But that phrase never came up around me, ever. I decided to reach out to one of our old neighbors. She lived 2 doors down and used to babysit both of us sometimes. I found her number through a mutual friend and gave her a call. She still remembered us right away. We caught up briefly, and then I asked if she remembered anything from around the time I turned 12. She did. She told me she once brought over a birthday gift for me that year, a small Lego set, and my parents turned her away at the door. They told her we didn't do birthdays anymore. She left the gift anyway, but wasn't sure if I ever got it. I didn't. That moment hit hard. It wasn't just about what my parents didn't do. It was about what they made sure no one else did either. It wasn't forgetting. It was closing a door and locking it behind them. After that, I started writing everything down. Not just the memories, but the feelings that came with them. I kept a notebook with dates, quotes, pieces of conversations. One memory stood out. I was 15, home with the flu, and pretty out of it. My mom was scheduled to work a double that day. Instead of calling out, she made my younger brother stay home from school to take care of me. I remember hearing her tell him to make sure I drank water and didn't sleep too long. She left without saying much to me. At the time, I didn't think about it too deeply, but now it landed different. Even when I needed care, it got handed off like a chore. Then came the email. It showed up on a Tuesday evening. The subject line was "Let It Go." I opened it and read through a long wall of text. My dad had written paragraphs about how I was digging up old ghosts, playing victim, and letting therapy warp my memories. He said everyone's childhood has some bad parts, that I should stop trying to assign blame just because things weren't perfect. There wasn't a single question, not one moment of asking how I was or why I felt the need to bring all this up now. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to my therapist, then opened my phone, blocked his number and deleted the email thread. I didn't announce it to anyone. I just did it, quiet and final. That weekend, I told my brother and grandmother. Neither of them asked me to reconsider. No one said I should try again. My grandmother just asked what I was planning for the next Sunday call, and my brother said he'd be around if I needed anything. And just like that, the door that was always half shut finally closed. This time on my terms. A few months after cutting off contact with my father, my therapist suggested something simple but clear: build around what's working, not what's missing. She encouraged me to create new spaces, not to fill old gaps, but to reflect who I've actually become, not the version my parents decided I was. So I threw a second celebration. I called it the Belated Birthday Bash and made it open invite to a mix of friends, coworkers, and neighbors I'd grown closer with over the last year. Nothing formal, just good food, a rented backyard space, music, and a loose excuse to gather without awkward family tension hovering over everything. My brother came early to help set up. He handled decorations and I took care of drinks and food trays. My grandmother arrived carrying a small photo frame wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a picture of me at maybe 6 years old, grinning in front of a homemade chocolate cake with blue frosting. One of the last birthday photos anyone had of me looking that happy. She placed it on the edge of the snack table. No big speech, just a quiet nod. As the night picked up, conversations drifted from work gossip to childhood stories. A few guests eventually noticed my parents weren't there. One neighbor asked directly if they couldn't make it. I answered honestly, they weren't invited. I didn't give a speech or ask for pity. I just explained that I didn't feel safe around people who still refused to take responsibility for how they'd treated me. A few people nodded and shared their own versions. One friend talked about a sibling who got everything growing up while she became the built-in babysitter. Another mentioned a mother who only called when she needed help with bills. It wasn't heavy or dramatic. No one turned it into a therapy circle. Just quick moments of understanding that made everything feel lighter, like we all had our own version of silence to crawl out from. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice wasn't soft or curious. It was clipped. She'd heard about the party through someone else and wanted to know why she hadn't been invited. No confusion, just accusation. I told her the truth, but I didn't feel emotionally safe around her. That I wasn't interested in pretending we were fine just to keep the peace. She didn't take it well. She launched into a list of things she'd sacrificed for me. Shifts she picked up, sleep she lost, vacations she never took. I didn't argue. I just said I wasn't asking for guilt. I was asking for honesty, something she'd never given me. She asked to meet in person. I told her I'd meet for coffee, but only if she really planned to listen. Not defend, not redirect, just listen. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. She showed up 12 minutes late and waved off the delay like it didn't matter. From the moment she sat down, the focus stayed on her. She talked about how hard those years were, how tired she always was, how no one appreciated what she gave up. She mentioned me in passing, but never once asked what it had been like on my end. After 20 minutes, I finally cut in. I laid it all out. The 12th birthday, the missing celebrations, the gift my grandmother had tried to bring but was told not to, the neighbors who were turned away, the sick days where my younger brother was made to care for me. Every detail I'd spent the last few months uncovering, I gave her clearly, without raising my voice. She sat still for a moment, then instead of apologizing, she said the same line I'd heard before. I didn't think you needed much from me. That was it. No shock, no remorse. Just the same old script. I told her calmly that she never bothered to ask what I needed. She just made that decision for me, like a judgment she passed early on and never reviewed. She didn't say much after that. She picked at her napkin, glanced around the cafe, and eventually said she hoped things got better for me. I stood up, paid for my own drink, and walked out. Later that week in therapy, I went over the whole thing, from the call to the coffee shop, to the final sentence she gave me. My therapist asked how I felt about it. I didn't answer with some big emotional speech. I just said, she didn't listen. But I spoke, and that's enough for now. And we moved on. After the coffee meeting with my mother, I went back home and started laying everything out. Not to send or share, but just to see it clearly. I opened a blank document and began listing key moments from childhood through now, dates, places, people, and all the small turning points I used to wave off like they didn't matter. It turned into a personal timeline. No commentary, just facts. The things that actually happened. My therapist suggested I write an unsent letter too. Something honest, not polished. Just everything I'd never had space to say when I was growing up. I wrote it late one night, 4 pages long. I talked about birthdays, yes, but also the day they left me at soccer practice for an hour because they forgot the schedule. I brought up the times my report cards got ignored, how my friends' parents knew more about my interests than my own did. I ended it by saying I never wanted perfection. I just wanted to be noticed. While sorting through old memories for the timeline, one specific moment kept circling back. On my 16th birthday, nothing happened. That wasn't new, but a few days later, my younger brother got gifted a tablet. Not for school, not for a holiday. Just because I remembered watching him open it at the kitchen table while I ate leftover pasta. No one looked at me. No one said anything about the date. I asked him about it on a call. He remembered, said he thought about it afterward. Thought it was weird. Thought maybe I didn't want to celebrate anymore. Then he admitted he should have said something. I told him it wasn't his job to correct things our parents created. He offered to talk to them on my behalf, but I turned it down. It wasn't his responsibility to carry. Around that time, I got a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. She'd heard bits and pieces about everything from our grandmother and wanted to talk. We got on a video call the next day. She told me she always felt like the emotional one in her family. Her mother, my aunt, used to call her too sensitive. Same way mine called me too serious. She remembered visiting our house once and leaving early because it felt strange. She said it didn't feel like a home, just a place with people in it. She also mentioned that our grandmother had gotten into an argument with my mother years ago about how I was being treated. She didn't know the details, just that it ended with my grandmother not coming around as often. It didn't surprise me at that point, but hearing it from someone else added another layer. Later that week, I went to my grandmother's place to return a book she had lent me. While I was there, she brought out a small box from the top of her closet. It was full of old photos, birthday cards, and notes she'd kept over the years. In the stack was a letter she once wrote to my mother. It wasn't harsh or dramatic, just honest. She wrote about how distant the house had become, how she worried I wasn't being treated with the same care as my brother, how silence wasn't the same as peace. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it back in the envelope. That night, I wrote one final message to my mother. No insults, no arguments, just a boundary. I told her that unless she could take real accountability, I would be stepping away indefinitely. I didn't ask her to change. I didn't ask her to explain. I just said I was done trying to force something that had never been offered freely. Her reply came within the hour. Just one sentence. I did the best I could. No apology. No reflection. No mention of anything I'd shared. I stared at it for a minute, then deleted the message. After that, I removed her contact entirely. No more phone number, no more email, no more access. I didn't make a speech about it to anyone. I just let my brother and grandmother know what I'd done. They both understood, neither of them asked me to undo it. And just like that, the chapter closed, not out of anger but out of clarity. After cutting contact with my mother, I brought it up in therapy. My therapist didn't frame it as some dramatic goodbye. She said something I kept in mind for the rest of that week. Drawing a boundary isn't cruelty, It's survival. It's choosing peace where none was offered before. I didn't need to fight anymore. I just needed to stop handing out invitations to people who kept showing up empty-handed. My brother saw everything unfold. He knew about the letter, the reply, the coffee shop meeting. A few days after I told him I'd blocked her, he called me. Not to argue, but to tell me he was stepping back too. Not out of anger, but clarity. He said he couldn't keep playing neutral when it was clear who had always been expected to hold the silence. He wasn't interested in being part of that anymore. We started building new traditions, not to make up for the past, but to build something that belonged to us now. That summer, we decided to throw a half-birthday celebration. No real reason for the date. We just picked a weekend that worked and called it a new tradition. We invited our grandmother, our cousin, and a handful of close friends. No decorations with our names on them, no family photo boards, just music, grilled food, and a table where no one had to perform. Our grandmother brought lemon bars. Our cousin made everyone laugh with a story about our uncle trying to fix a dishwasher with duct tape. It wasn't about nostalgia, it was just about now. The kind of simple, solid joy we didn't get enough of growing up. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, I went out to the backyard with a shoebox. I hadn't told anyone about it. I dug a small hole near the edge of the garden and placed the box inside. It had 4 things: the keychain from my 12th birthday that never got delivered, the letter my grandmother wrote to my mother years ago, a photo from the last birthday I remember being celebrated, and the unsent letter I wrote to my parents. I covered it with dirt, smoothed it down, and walked away. No speech, no big gesture, just something private. Something that felt like a full stop on a sentence I never got to finish. A few days later, I was cleaning out an old cabinet when I found a cassette player. I wasn't even sure it worked, but when I popped in a tape labeled SFX plus me, it whirred to life. The voice that played was mine, maybe 8 or 9 years old, doing sound effects, telling fake news stories, making robot noises. I listened all the way through. At the end, there was a skit where I pretended to host a game show. I gave myself the winning prize, a banana. I laughed out loud. Then I sat still for a while, letting that kid's voice echo through the room. I didn't feel broken, I just recognized how much he'd carried without help. A few days later at work, a coworker mentioned their son was turning 12 soon, and asked if I had any recommendations for a beginner-friendly skateboard. Something clicked. I went to a local shop on my lunch break and picked out a board with a cool design, plus a card. I didn't write anything long, just happy birthday. Keep rolling forward. That act, as small as it was, made everything feel lighter. Not because it fixed anything, but because I got to decide how the story keeps going. At my next therapy session, my therapist asked if I felt like I was healed. I didn't say yes. I said I felt real, and that was more than I used to. After that, I started working on a side project. Just a small idea, organizing birthday celebrations for kids who might otherwise be overlooked. Not a big charity, not a formal group, just quiet gestures. A cake here, a card there, making the day matter in a way it should. It's not a redemption arc. I'm not trying to rewrite my own story through someone else. But it's something rooted in action, not waiting for someone else to change. Something that says, this mattered to me, so I'll make it matter for someone else. And that's where I decided to begin. It's been a full year since I first sat down in therapy and brought up the birthday I turned 12. I didn't plan to remember the exact date when it came around again, but I did. I marked it quietly: coffee, a walk around the block, a journal open on my desk. No candles, no flashbacks, just space, enough to notice the time that had passed. One morning, not long after, I found a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten envelope. My mother's name in the top left corner. Inside were 2 pages filled with stories from my childhood. How I used to sing along to commercials. How I liked my sandwiches cut into triangles. Little things she remembered, but not the thing that mattered. There wasn't a single line about what she missed. No mention of silence or absence or the years she chose not to show up. I read it once. Then I placed it in the back of a drawer with the rest of the things I didn't need to carry around anymore. Instead of letting it drag me backward, I focused forward. My brother and I had talked about doing something simple for our birthdays, nothing big, just a dinner that didn't come with pressure or pretending. We picked a place downtown with long tables and warm lighting, invited only people we trusted. Our cousin came, our grandmother showed up with a small wrapped gift, and one of our friends brought a homemade playlist. Before we sat down to eat, our grandmother handed me a frame. Inside was a photo from when I was 11. I was sitting at a kitchen table with a crooked party hat and a smear of frosting across my cheek. I didn't even remember the photo being taken, but there it was, a clear frozen second from one of the last birthdays that still looked like joy. I placed the frame on the shelf above my desk when I got home. Not to mourn what followed, but to remind myself it wasn't all empty. A week later, our community project launched. My cousin helped with the paperwork and logistics. We started small, one neighborhood, a handful of volunteers, a budget just big enough to cover cards, cupcakes, and a few decorations. The goal wasn't to fix anything, just to celebrate kids who might otherwise be overlooked. At our first event, there was a boy turning 12. He showed up with his aunt, barely said a word at first. We handed him a card, a small wrapped box, and a cupcake with a candle already lit. His eyes lit up before he even touched the frosting. When he hugged me on his way out, he didn't say anything. He just held on for a second longer than expected. That was more than enough. That night, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence. I never got the 12th birthday I wanted, but I helped someone else get theirs. That's enough for me. I stopped trying to chase closure after that. It stopped being about finishing a chapter or fixing anyone. It just became about not dragging things that didn't want to move. Some stories don't have neat endings, they just shift. You learn to carry them differently. On my next birthday, I didn't plan anything big, but my friends did. I walked into my apartment after work and found a cake waiting on the table. It was simple, chocolate frosting, rainbow sprinkles, and a single line across the top in icing, "To the boy who deserved better." I laughed first. Then I sat down and let the silence fill the room in a different way. Not cold, not empty, just quiet. Like the moment was finally safe to hold. I didn't blow out the candle right away. I looked around the room and saw my brother smiling from the couch, my cousin pulling out paper plates, a friend queuing up a song on her phone. No performances, no tension, just people who had decided to show up and keep showing up. That night, after everyone left, I sat by the framed photo of my 11-year-old self and didn't feel like I had to choose between him and who I am now. For the first time, it felt like we were in the same room. Both of us allowed to stay. I don't need permission to celebrate myself anymore. I never did. I just needed to realize the absence wasn't my fault. And so, I'll end this the way I started, with a birthday. Not the one I lost, but the one I gave. The one that landed in the hands of a quiet kid with a shy smile who left with frosting on his chin. They stopped giving me presents when I turned 12. This year, I gave one to someone else, and that's how I'll keep going.